How'd you like to listen to .NET Rocks with no ads? Easy. Become a patron. For just $5 a month, you get access to a private RSS feed where all the shows have no ads. $20 a month will get you that and a special .NET Rocks patron mug. Sign up now at patreon.netrocks.com.
Hey, Carl and Richard here with your 2024 NDC schedule.
We'll be at as many NDC conferences as possible this year, and you should consider attending no matter what.
NDC Oslo is happening June 10th through the 14th. Get your tickets at ndcoslo.com.
The Copenhagen Developers Festival happens August 26th through the 30th. Early bird discount ends April 26th. Tickets at cphdevfest.com.
NDC Porto is happening October 14th through the 18th. The early bird discount ends June 14th. Tickets at ndcporto.com.
And we'll see you there, we hope.
Hey, welcome back to .NET Rocks. I'm Carl Franklin.
And I'm Richard Campbell.
Our friend Anthony Eden from DNSimple is here. But before we talk to him, man, it's been a while since we did any small talk or anything. What's new in Vancouver?
Well, I'm up in the coast now, right? I don't live down the city anymore. And you know that you went to the original house, the one that I sold last year.
Yeah.
And you know it had a bit of rack in it. You know, a couple of racks here and there.
A rack?
You know, like the server racks.
Oh, racks, server racks, yeah.
And so now that
I thought you might have been talking about wine. Because you do that as well.
No, I had a bunch of those too, but no, we're talking about the server racks. And so when I moved up here, I'm like, I'm de-rackifying my life.
Good for you, man.
Yeah. So
more cloud, less rack.
Well, I mean, I got a lot of stuff in the cloud, but you still need a local network, and you have to have a good one. So
yeah, you need a switch.
I could have ended up with a couple of rack-mounted switches and controllers and stuff. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing it. I'm going to stay small. So I actually built it under the stairs, mounted to a piece of plywood.
I love that. Harry Potter style.
So, and it's also flat and tidy, and I can see all the blinky lights. Like, it's all the features you want from a rack, no rack.
I like that. That's very cool.
Yeah. And about 24 hours of UPS on it, too.
I had a visitor this weekend. Mr. Mark Miller was at my house.
I heard of that guy. I heard they were in Connecticut.
Just him.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, the rest of the family is in Spain still, but he came.
Okay.
And I OD'd him on amazing keto food. He could not stop talking about it. I mean, we had ribeyes, we had cheeseburgers, we had ice cream. Oh, man, it was great. Pastrami.
Awesome.
All right, anyway, and nobody wants to hear about that. Let's get started with Better Know Framework. Roll the music.
Awesome. All right, man, what do you got?
Now, I don't remember if I talked about this when it came out, but this was during the pandemic it came out.
Oh.
There's a great little tool called Jitsi.
I've never heard of it.
And Jitsi is a free open source sort of conference tool like Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
It's browser-based. And it has a wonderful API, and you can host your own server. And so this article right here from Build59s, which is a great name. I love that, build59s.com.
I had a great blog. I read it all the time.
Yeah. Host private video meetings in Azure with Jitsi.
And
so all you really need is an Azure Linux VM. The software is free, and it's open source. You have chat, password protected conference sessions, audio and video, support for many simultaneously connected users. And the really cool thing about it is there's no limit to the length of a meeting.
Nice. So you don't have to deal with any of that. You just have to pay for the VM.
Yeah, you just have to pay for the VM. So like if you wanted to set up cameras and stuff and just have them always on, boom.
No problem.
Done. And it works on phones.
Cool.
It's amazing.
Oh, and of course, this article came out in April of 2020 when we were all trying to figure out Zoom at the same time, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And I did around that time. I did a tour of the the Air Force Museum in Daytona, Ohio, with our friend Clemens Vasters.
Yeah,
using an open Zoom, and we got bombed. How badly bombed did we get? I was recording it locally because we were going to chop it up and use it. And suddenly I realized after we got the idiot out of there that I now had child porn on my server.
Okay, so now I understand what you mean by bombed.
Yeah.
I don't know because, Clemens likes beer, you like scotch.
That kind of thing.
Then again, given 2024, you could have had actual bombs dropping on you.
No. Not that part of the world.
All right. So you got
Anyway.
a cyber attack.
Yeah, effectively. But it was, that was back when all that stuff was pretty insecure. It's all gotten better now. But, no substitute for running your own.
Right. But I do remember the Zoom bombs that people used to just jump in all of a sudden.
2020, yeah.
And, because there was no password protection.
That's right.
Because who needs that?
Anyway. Well, we were all clumsy. It's not that long ago. That's 4 years ago.
Well, that's what I got. Who's talking to us today, Richard?
I grabbed a comment off of show 1889, the one we did with Magnus Martinson. We were talking about Azure in general and across certain architectural points. And Rob had this great comment. He says, great show as always. I have noticed, however, a common theme to a lot of Azure episodes. Quote, the developer is using it wrong, close quote. Like what was that? The Jobs line about the iPhone? You're holding it wrong?
Yeah.
Usually this is related to Azure devs and admins not removing extra capacity or not understanding how to structure cloud resources versus on-prem resources. I think if you make a tool and the majority of really experienced tool users hit their foot with it, maybe saying the users need to figure out how to not hit their foot with it is not the best corrective approach.
Yeah.
Also, telling devs you didn't do your homework is a bit of a cop-out.
Yeah.
It's more likely that devs did try to do their homework, but maybe the documentation is not as clear as you might think it is, or the interface is not as clear either.
Right.
I'm 100% certain that the correct documentation is out there. Oh, boy, your optimism, Rob. I'm 100% certain the documentation out there is incorrect.
Yeah.
It is likely somewhere in the haystack of wrong and just irrelevant information that is also out there. Improving Azure may be less about improving code and more about figuring out what the devs are using it for and doing wrong with it and improving the interface or documentation to reduce those errors. You have called us out, sir, and I read this for a reason. You are correct. You are 100% correct. It shouldn't be so easy to do this wrong.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. And to fall into that trap. It should be easier to do it right. And that's all something we should work towards.
Mm-hmm.
So, Rob, thank you so much for your comment and a copy of Music Code By. It's on its way to you. And if you'd like a copy of Music Code By, write a comment on the website at .netrocks.com or on the Facebooks. We publish every show there. And if you comment there and I read on the show, we'll send you a copy of Music Code By.
And you can definitely follow us on Twitter if you want. We've been there for years, but the cool kids are now hanging out on Mastodon. I'm at Carl Franklin at techhub.social.
And I'm Rich Campbell at mastodon.social.
And all the ways you can get in touch with me are finely detailed at carlfranklin.com. Okay, let's bring Anthony Eden back. It's only been 10 years.
Wow. Well,
Gentlemen.
Let me introduce you formally. Anthony is the founder of DNSimple and the perpetrator of numerous open source projects. He's also contributed to a wide variety of open source projects over the past 20 plus years as a software developer using multiple languages, including Java, Python, Ruby, Clojure, Go, and Erlang. And yeah, welcome back, Anthony. I got to tell the story again. It was 10 years ago.
Tell the story, Carl.
All right. So here's how we met, Anthony. We were on a road trip, right, Richard?
Mm-hmm. We were.
Must have been the 2010 Visual Studio 2010 road
2012, I think.
2012. Okay. You would remember better than me. So anyway.
Because it was the road trip that never ended, right? 34 cities.
That was the big
weeks.
one. Yeah, with Numbnuts. So the Numbnuts was the nickname we gave our driver.
That's the nicest name.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so I get an email because I'm at the table. I'm working. I'm doing email the whole time. Richard's up in the passenger seat playing Own This World and not talking to anybody. Go on a road trip with your buddy Carl. He's like the most antisocial person ever. He's just playing a game the whole time.
2013.
But he won. Yeah. He did when he came in number one on this game.
For briefly.
So I got this email, and it was from a company that I won't mention their name, but it rhymes with Slow Chatty. Okay? So this person at slowchatty.com says, hey, we like your show. We would like to advertise with you. And I read it to Richard, and Richard and I looked at each other. It's like, we hate slowpatty.com, but we love DNSimple. So, I had just started because Scott Hanselman told us about DNSimple. So I had your, I don't know. I think I just sent it to sales@dnsimple.com, and I forwarded the email and I said, hey, we just got this email, but we hate these guys. Would you guys be interested in advertising with us? And I remember your reply was, continue, or something like that.
He said, interesting pitch.
Yeah, interesting pitch. That's right. Go on.
No, I
Anyway.
remember when you showed me the original email from the company that shall not be named, and you said, what do you think of this? And I went, but they suck.
But they suck. Why would we do that?
Why?
Well, funny enough, I was using them, and that was the origin of DNSimple, because I was using them and I said, this can't be as good as it gets.
No.
Yeah.
It can't be.
Yeah.
And so I had all the knowledge. I'd been working in a DNS and domain space for many, many years. And I said, all right, I'm going to finally try to build something. After 17 years of doing stuff with other people, I'm going to do my own thing.
This was your thing. Yeah. And that show we did back in 2014 was really cool because you were quite the polyglot then.
Yeah.
Which I think today isn't that weird, but at the time was pretty unusual.
Yeah.
We did a lot of unusual things. I mean, the remote working. So for example, in 2014 and still even today, we're fully remote. We always have been, which now it feels a lot more normal after COVID.
Right.
You know, a lot of people had to learn how to work from home. We walked right into that with saying, well, this is how we already do business.
This is normal. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost like you were a born in the cloud company before it was really kind of cloudish yet. Like you had that style.
I think that's fair. Having run servers for a while, when I had the opportunity to no longer run servers, I said, I don't ever want to do that again.
You and me both, brother. You can preach.
So we started registering domains at Network Solutions, right?
Yeah,
as
me
everybody
too, yeah.
did, you know. And I never used Slow Patty, but I tried once, and it was just like, oh, this is ridiculous. But Network Solutions was ridiculous enough.
Yeah.
And on top of, so the problem that you faced, and we all faced, and the reason why we love DNSimple is because the simple act of registering a domain and changing things, and oh, God forbid, if you want to transfer it, oh my God, they put you through all these things, and they put up, you know, fake things that you need to click on. And then, oh my God, I've just increased my subscription to $500 a month or whatever.
Oh yeah. All the deceptive clicking
Predatory.
thing. Yeah. The great thing about moving away from NetSol was that they made it so arduous. You're just so much keener to get it done.
Yeah.
Right. Like you didn't make it hard for me to want to leave.
And I'll tell the story again. And I probably told this 10 years ago, but I was using DNSimple on my phone in the security line at an airport, configuring my email server for Google. And it worked. And I did it with one hand, and it just worked.
Nice.
And I was like, well, this couldn't be any better. I mean, come on. Yeah. I've had nothing but great experiences.
Long-time fans, Anthony, as you know, we've been your customer for and because you were always awesome.
And I appreciate that. I'm glad that y'all have stuck with us, and hopefully we can keep your business for another 10 years at least.
Easily,
yes.
I am finally lapsing a few domain names I swore I would do something with someday,
Fair.
like, spring cleaning.
That I think everybody goes through that every once in a while, and they're like, okay, I'm never going to do this again.
Yeah.
I'm never, and then they're like, oh, but I have this idea for this.
Yeah, like
thing.
3 o'clock in the morning, I'm drunk and I registered .netcupcakes.com or something, right? And I'm like, why did I do that? Who did that?
So funny quick story. We almost built an iOS app for fast registering domains, which brought up, somebody said, I got to be able to drunk domain. And we almost built it. We went all the way through the design phase. We looked at it, and I said, folks, we can't build this because it's going to work.
Yeah.
Right.
And then we're going to be part of the problem.
Inundated.
Exactly. And I said, I don't want to be part of that problem.
Right. You were also the first person outside Google that I ever met that said that they built something real with Go.
Yeah.
And DNSimple was built on Go, right? Golang?
Yeah, we have our core web app is still Ruby on Rails, has been and will continue to be most likely. All of the systems that kind of integrate everything together so that send data out to our edges and a lot of the smaller sort of glue pieces, those are all in Go. And then our name servers are in Erlang.
That's great.
Right.
Yeah.
Just pure speed.
Yep.
Erlang's great for building network toolkits, essentially. Those networking things, really great at taking packets apart and putting them back together. Go is really good for gluing things together, super clear language, and we have a lot of small utilities. And then Rails is still our web framework of choice. It's just such a good framework. And it's even today, it gets better each day. So that's always a good sign.
All right. So you're here to announce some new stuff that you have in the cloud and for the community. So last time, 10 years ago, there was like a C# API that you announced, right?
So I think the C# API we announced back, actually more recently, it was about 3 or 4 years ago when we brought that out. I think 10 years ago, we were still just talking about DNSimple at its early ages, right?
Oh, yeah. That's right. So it wasn't
we had Enrique Cambro come on to talk about the API.
Yes. You had Enrique on talking about that.
Okay.
And so that was kind of the start. We always knew that we wanted to sort of help and get involved in the Windows world a little bit. And we always saw Azure as something we wanted to somehow hook up to. Well, a couple of years back, we started working on what we're calling our domain control plane. And the idea is that you'd be able to not only manage your domains that are inside DNSimple and your DNS there, but also your DNS and other providers as well. And so early this year, we started working on the Azure provider and we've launched that.
Nice.
So essentially now from within DNSimple, you can hook up to Azure and you can actually pull in your domains that are in Azure and manage them just like you would your DNSimple domains, manage the DNS on them, add records, do all kinds of things, including through the API. So essentially you can have a single place, and not just Azure, but we also do Route 53 and Core DNS as well.
Right.
And so the idea is that you have this unified interface for managing your domains, even if you can't pull them into DNSimple, or if you want to manage them on multiple providers, because now more and more people are using at least 2 different providers for redundancy's sake.
So does that mean when I create a new web app in Azure and I want to add a custom domain, I don't have to add text records with ASUID dot whatever to? I
mean, if you set up it for you could do that easily, right? Because you're in DNSimple, you could set up a template for it or something like that and just put it in. But even if you had it inside of Azure and you pulled that domain in, you'd be able to apply that same thing over to that domain over in Azure. And the idea is just, if you're running authoritative DNS, some part of your authoritative DNS on Azure, you should be able to manage that from within DNSimple. That's our opinion of it. And so that's where the domain control plane is headed.
Well, and this is why I read that comment from Rob too, because it hit me with the main tech support calls I've ever made or ever had with DNSimple is because I'm adjusting DNS entries on something that's no longer be run by DNSimple. Because I had to pull it over to Azure DNS because Azure does a bunch of trickery with their services that it's just so much easier if the DNS is there. And then you forget, you never take it out of DNSimple, and then I'm tweaking it in DNSimple. Nothing's happening. I'm like, am I losing my mind? And your tech support people are lovely. They're just like, I don't think we're actually your DNS provider for this. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
What?
You may be losing your mind, but that is beside the point.
Yeah, separate issue entirely. So I feel like you're building the tool that Rob was expressing around that, which is like, what if you had one place to look at DNS and the fact that it happened to run in DNSimple or run in Azure or route in Route 53? Who cares? You look from one point of view.
Yeah. And APIs all the APIs are different. Right. So you go to any of these APIs and you're going to have to go digging and digging. And so essentially what we've done is do the digging for you so you don't have to anymore.
Do the digging for it. Because so otherwise we're each going to roll our own on this and we're all going to hate ourselves. So we'll just hate you.
Pretty much.
It's so much easier to hate you.
Yeah. Hate me. Or love me because I've done a good job, which is ideally what I want.
Well, and that's why I'm delighted you've done it, because your UI doesn't try and deceive me like some sites, generally makes things pretty darn clear. By the way, you did add this thing, like if you've left your DNS running in DNSimple and it's not actually the supervisor, it makes it very clear, like, this is not being used. I'm not deleting your entries, but this is not being used.
Yeah. And we're going to continue. We're right now actually working on trying to make that even better as well. All the experience inside of DNSimple so that we can help people not have to go through that pain of not being able to see that something is somewhere else as well. Because it's a challenge, right? There's a lot of complex DNS, which has been around for so long, still is a hard thing to understand often.
I mean, and the haiku is still true. You couldn't, it's not DNS. It couldn't be DNS.
It's DNS. It's DNS. Yeah. So, but you guys also do things like, I don't go to Whois to look for domains anymore. I just go to DNSimple and I try to register a domain. And if it's not available, it tells me. And it's so much easier than, believe it or not, Whois.net anyway has turned into like I haven't used it in a long time. My recollection is there's like ads and crap and stuff in there as well that I just.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they have to, they're trying to monetize in some way. The interesting thing is that Whois as a protocol is going to die. It's being replaced actually right now. So the new protocol it's going to replace is called RDAP, and that is being slowly rolled out throughout the world.
Wow.
Well, and it probably needs replacement. Whois was from a kinder, gentler internet.
It was very much from a kinder, gentler time.
Oh, speaking of that, there have been some DNS hijacking attacks. There always have been, but I heard about some more recently in the last couple of years. Like a DNS poisoning attacks. Those are kind of common. How do those things happen? Do you know about these?
Yeah, I mean, in essence, you have, with DNS, when I do a query, I go to a resolver. And then that resolver queries something else. Well, if you can somehow poison the cache inside that resolver with a bogus answer, then it will hold on to it in its cache for a certain amount of time. And essentially, that's the attack vector. And DNSSEC was designed to essentially stop that.
And both guys who implemented it think it's great.
Yeah, I got yelled at from not a customer, but a listener who says, you don't have DNSSEC on your domains and stuff. And I think I mentioned it to you, Anthony, and you're like, yeah.
I mean, it's funny. The adoption of that protocol, which has been around for quite a long time, has actually been a really rocky road. So much so where you have new attempts at other ways of solving that same problem. But the problem, no matter what, is still the same, right? You have to trust that the data from the originating authoritative name server has not been tampered with.
Right.
And the only way you can do that is with cryptography. Like you have to have something that's cryptographically signed, or otherwise you cannot. Ultimately, you can't trust it. Now,
and as soon as you involve certificates, 99% of us go nope and walk away.
Yeah, poisoning attacks, I think, are probably ones that yes, they happen. The ones that really I think you'll hear about more often than not are just social engineering.
Yep.
I mean, most often the way that you get at companies, or the way that the people that want to cause havoc get at companies or individuals, is by social engineering. Yeah. They find a way through. Yeah, phishing's one way. They find it through support channels. They do things like that. And that's actually one of the reasons why in our core training, nobody joins DNSimple without going through training on how to deal with support. Yeah. And specifically, what are the rules for accepting anything via support? And they're very limited because we can't be sure that you are who you are.
Right.
Unless you come into the app, used multi-factor authentication, then we're probably, then the responsibility is you.
It's a reasonable level of confidence. This is another story from the Wayback Machine, Carl, but it came up the other day, which was Replay TV.
Oh,
you remember TiVo?
Yeah,
and of course TiVo was the original. Replay TV was like their cheaper alternative. None of which worked in Canada, and I'm in Canada, right? So I get my hands on a Replay TV because I found a chunk of hacked software that could run as the Replay TV host. And so I just lie to the Replay TV unit with DNS to go, oh, your server's right here, the next machine up in the rack, running Linux, where I was able to scrape, pull Canadian guide data in, format correctly, and load it in the Replay TV. It was never the wiser. Goodness knows you never wanted it to call home, right? You could only call to my little server world.
You Canadians have been struggling with TV metadata ever since, you first came on .NET Rocks, like in 2002.
Well, yeah, TV had to go away. It wasn't fixable, right? It's just like, that's the old Dyson quote. It's easier to put Wi-Fi everywhere to make a good disconnected client, right? The answer was actually, what if there was no TV anymore?
Yeah.
Does TV even exist? Do companies still broadcast out on the waves?
Apparently. I wouldn't know.
Surprising.
I don't know.
Yeah, from what I understand, I haven't done it, but from what I understand, you can put up an antenna and get HD.
A digital antenna and get an HD signal from the
air.
Right out of the air.
Madness.
What is this stuff?
But, you can only get probably if you're next to a major city, 4 or 5 channels.
Yeah.
If you want to relive the 70s, which I would not.
but at least
I had an antenna that we had a little dial, and you had to click it and like a compass, and you could hear it going tick, 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 to point to different places. That's how old I am.
Nice. All right. So DNSSEC's never gone anywhere. RDApp's now going to replace who is. So, I mean, we're inching towards more secure things. I think in general, we've been moving towards, certainly, I know for you guys, is securing the domains. Because once a domain gets hijacked, you got problems.
Which is why we've been one of the, I think as the technology has improved for adding multi-factor authentication, we've been adopting it ahead of pretty much almost every other registrar. So you can even use hardware keys with DNSimple now. You can of course use two-factor auth tokens. We don't let you use your phone because frankly it's too easy to hijack SMS. But we have these multiple layers of security. We also, since we last talked, we've added multi-team member security. You can give team members access to only specific domains. You can give them access only to the DNS side of it or also to the domain registration side of it. So we've put a lot of thought and energy into how you secure those domains. And we're going to keep doing so. Like it's an important part of what we do. Our key elements are security and also, of course, good support. And then making sure that we have a good API so that you can do all kinds of things with us. And that's another thing that changed too, because we now have API tokens that you can easily rotate, and you can have multiple API tokens with different names. You can give them access to limited resources. So it's come a long ways since 10 years ago, as I would hope it would.
And here's another great success story for DNSimple. A friend of mine had a slow patty domain that he wanted to that he registered that I wanted to take over, and vice versa. So I had him create an account at DNSimple. And once he had that account, I just hit a button. Oh yeah, transfer to this guy. Here's his email address. Boom. Done. And then he can take it from there. And it's so easy. Why isn't it that easy everywhere else?
Well, so when it comes to transferring from one provider to another, it's actually still really hard.
Yeah,
and I'm going to let you in on something. It's not really a secret, but in addition to supporting Azure and Route 53, we also took the time to integrate with GoDaddy's API specifically so you can connect to it and pull down your domain registration information from that. And so now you can actually see your GoDaddy domains and you can click transfer from GoDaddy and DNSimple, and we'll handle everything for you.
I'd much rather do that than go through their painful, suicidal wrist slashing process. So, and this is something, it is still hard today because the industry, unfortunately, put a lot of energy into making it hard early on. Right. They said, there was a small group of companies, they didn't really want to trade between each other. So okay, for security reasons, we'll put up these barriers.
Right. That had little to do with security and more to do with barriers.
I often question whether the early decisions really obviously there was some good intention, but there was also, I think, some pushing in the direction of let's make sure to make it a little difficult so that we encourage people to stay where they are. And it should be mobile. Honestly, domain names should be easily mobile between providers.
Right.
Plain and simple.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the core product here, the control plane is just being able to see wherever your DNS resources live everywhere. But there's sort of an inception-y part of this because you also provide an API to DNSimple so I could integrate it into my own workflows too.
Yep.
It's like, well, what front end would you like?
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. Exactly. Yeah. We've done integrations with Terraform, with Chef. We've done quite a few API clients. So we're up to 9 different languages now. And the idea is that at the small scale, if it's me and I have a few domains, I just want to go through the UI.
That's fine.
Right?
Yeah.
I just want to.
Yep.
But if I'm running 500 domains or 600 domains or 10,000 domains, it's UI is impossible, right? So you should be able to work equally well with either one of those.
I just like the idea of it's in your CI/CD pipeline that, okay, we're changing these server IPs to this now.
Yep.
That it's just part of the automation. And there's no exceptions there. The network guy isn't called separately for a rollout. Like if we're really going to push 6, 10, 15 times a day, it better not involve calling anybody. So
and we still have a lot of people that come to us and say, I want to move to DNSimple, but it's really hard because I have to send an individual email for each domain that I want to make a change on to customer support at some company that's from 1997.
Right.
And they can't even move it. So we've been trying to think, how the heck do we make that easier as well? So this is where all of this originated from, is we keep saying there's a lot of ways that it's still really hard.
Yeah.
I bet we can still do better.
No, you almost feel like, why did Word win over WordPerfect? Because early on, Word read and wrote WordPerfect files. The idea that you built a console now, The crazy part of the WordPerfect story, if you ever go deeper into it, is at one point WordPerfect broke their own format, and Word could fix it. So it's like, hey, are you using WordPerfect? And they've just updated, I think it was like 4.3 or something, and now it doesn't work correctly. If you're running in Word, it's fine.
I just remember
what you just described to me is the battle that I had, the days of trying to get DNS entries out of NetSol and into you. Now I would set up in the control plane and point to whatever service that these currently existed and say, okay, let's start moving those, and you'll do the nitty gritty.
Yeah,
that's the vision. The challenge, of course, is going to be very few providers have an API, and if they do, it doesn't even work.
Well, and these are dangerous APIs because this is about stealing domains. Like, these are dangerous APIs.
I want to hear more about the control plane, but let us take a quick break, and we'll be right back after these messages. Don't go away. And we're back. You're listening to .NET Rocks. I'm Carl Franklin. That's Richard Campbell.
Howdy.
We're here with our friend Anthony Eden from DNSimple. And by the way, if you don't want to hear ads, you can subscribe to Patreon, patreon.netrocks.com. Be a patron, and you can get an ad-free feed. And it's not all that much money. And we were talking, we were just getting back into talking about the control plane. And I think it kind of went over my head a little bit, but probably because I don't mess with multiple, domain providers. Like, I'm a DNSimple guy all the way. But can you give us some scenarios in which this new control plane is going to be really helpful?
Sure. So one straightforward example is you want to run on multiple providers. You want to run your DNS on both Azure and Route 53 because you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket.
Right.
Now, when you say run your DNS, you mean a DNS server?
No, I actually mean your authoritative zones. So you want to use Azure's cloud DNS, and you want to use Route 53, which is Amazon's cloud
as your secondary.
DNS.
Okay, but
and the notion of secondary is kind of it's moot. Like, these are really multiple providers. And maybe you also want to run it on DNSimple. Well, you want a single interface for seeing all of that. You can do that. So that's one example.
And when you say that, do you mean I would still have my domain registered at DNSimple, but I would have these authoritative providers on different clouds? Is that the idea?
Good.
Yeah.
It's an option. You can also run it through us as well. I think what we're accepting here is that everybody has different needs.
Yeah.
Right? Some folks, their operational team says, we need you to run on Azure. Plain and simple. They said there's no other option. But maybe doing that constantly is not working out great for them from an interface standpoint because they find it complicated or what have you. And they have team members who have used DNSimple.
Yeah.
Well, now they can just keep using DNSimple, even though they're managing those assets over there.
Right.
It's another example as well. Sometimes different departments have different needs, right? So maybe your core operations are going to be on one of the major cloud providers, but maybe your marketing team who's spinning up sites regularly, they need something that's faster. They need something that's relatively reasonably priced that they can get in and do it and get out quick and get everything set up in one shot. They'd rather do it on DNSimple than have to go through putting it on Azure. But you still want to have a unified interface to see all of this and to manage all of this. And that's the idea behind the domain control plane.
Now, I can imagine a marketing team cranking out subdomains constantly for every promotion, right? It's, spring special 24 .netrocks.com and you do
subdomains or even domains because with all the TLDs now you have so many choices. You can do these custom domains that are on some TLD that's going to be for a limited time.
Yeah.
Right. And that's totally okay.
Yeah. And you might be at a separate provider, it might be a different set of services. Like, I've certainly been dealing now with companies where it's not just that they have AWS and Azure and on-prem and other, but now they're expecting the transactions to coordinate between them.
Yeah.
Like, they want a message bus system just speaks to them all. And so the pipeline's complicated, and you're ending up with each of these interfaces to deal with each of these things. Anything that might simplify that for me, I'm excited to look at.
Yeah.
This question might be more of a selfish, self-interest thing, but I don't often get to talk to an expert like you once, on these things. So answer me this. Is there any reason why anyone should not use a TTL of 60 seconds?
Yes, there is.
Why?
So if you're using a TTL with 60 seconds, you're going to be constantly hitting the server, DNS is not a fault-proof protocol.
Yeah.
With UDP, it was never designed to be. And so you're going to have slower responses most likely because you're not going to be taking advantage of that cache that's out at the edge.
Okay.
So because you have multiple caching layers, right?
Okay.
And that matters in many cases. The difference between having your customer potentially who say, let me just give an example. If your customer is somewhere in Asia, they might be routed in a very complex route to get a DNS query out to one of our name servers, even though our name server is in Tokyo or Singapore.
Yeah, they have a cache.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. And so cache helps that. The minute you do it down to 60 seconds, you bust those caches pretty much constantly.
Yeah, who wants a 60-second DNS cache? Most of my failover systems were really in the 5 to 10 minute range, more than like an hour.
Well, the only problem there is that if you need to update something, now you have to wait 10 minutes, right?
Yep.
So is the way to do it you set it to 10 minutes, and then when you're going to update it, you send it to a minute, wait 10 minutes, then change it. Maybe everything gets repopulated and then go back to 10 minutes.
I think that's a smart way of doing it. If you want to make sure that the switchover happens quickly, then that's definitely the approach you want to do. You want to shorten that TTL just when you're doing that change.
Okay.
Alternatively, you allow the fact that there's going to be two systems running at once. You design for that case and you allow that to happen naturally. Resolve any of the things that happen during that transition using whatever you have in your backend implementation, and you move on. And then you don't even have to worry about those TTLs.
See, this is probably stuff Richard talks about on Run As Radio, but I don't get to talk about this stuff much.
Yeah, so, we were talking about moving over to a multiple, to a replacement scaled site. We talk about the drain, right? We'd set up the new entries. The old system would remain running and we'd just keep shutting down services, but you'd have to wait till you hadn't had a ping for an hour before you turn the last one off.
Yeah.
So it's like now every TTL is drained. You can shut that off.
Yep. Yeah. We've had to do the same thing as well over the years, numerous times where we've had to sort of slowly spin down some service that we've had. And we have to, even today, we're still dealing with some legacy IP addresses that we have assigned to name servers that almost nobody uses, but somebody's using it and we don't want to disrupt them. So we just really, when we think at DNSimple, when we think of terms of transitions, it's often in terms of years.
Right. It's fair.
We're transitioning things.
Yeah.
And it adds a whole nother layer of complexity because you have to keep that transition happening cleanly. But man, it sure is nice when stuff just keeps working for the customer, right? Ultimately, that's how we see it is. It's just, they shouldn't even know.
This is one of the nice things about the cloud environment is eventually I've wound this down to a single small instance that's costing me $5 a month.
Me too.
I'll keep that going. That's fine until it hasn't been hit for a long time.
You remember those days, Richard, when we would spin up a new SQL server whenever we had a new podcast?
Yeah.
What? No, you did not.
Oh, in our own VMs? Yeah.
Yeah.
They don't do that anymore.
We had to unlearn.
Has no databases. It's just JSON files.
Yeah, me too.
Nice.
I had to unlearn that behavior.
The joy of text files, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know how often a podcast entry changes? Never. You make it once and it never changes. Why is it in a dynamic data store?
Yeah.
Yeah. All of our blog at DNSimple, our support pages, our developer pages are all static sites, and they're all generated with a static site generator. And what a difference! It just makes things so much easier to keep running. That you just don't have to think about it, right? Because there's nothing to break.
Yeah.
Here's another gotcha: when you register a domain name or a web app in Azure, you don't want that IP address to change. And if you don't get a static IP address or something, it could just change. And then one day your site's down. You go to Azure portal. Oh, the IP address is different. That's fun.
Wow.
It feels like that's the...
ask me how I know.
It's how do you know? No, I think I know exactly how you know, Carl. But it feels like that's the thing where this is an example back to that original comment in the beginning. That should just be automated.
Yep.
Yeah.
If that address changes, then something like in our case, a webhook gets fired. Plus, if the name is in Azure already, it should just update it, right? But even if it's outside of Azure, there should be a webhook that's fired that something else can pick up.
Which, that's one of the reasons I moved my DNS for Run As, because it was running in an Azure app service, over to the Azure side, because you don't really have control over your IP addresses in Azure. They do. So if you hook the whole thing together, they do that for you. I'm sure there's a solution. It's just 6 pages of work I didn't have to do. Just move the DNS.
Yeah, you know what the solution is? Like, what I do. Run a PowerShell script that runs every hour, that checks the website to make sure it's up and looks for some valid data that's coming out of your data store.
I see the shape of your hammer there, dude.
You know?
So, but this is a great use. This is an example of where the Azure integration actually might make sense in DNSimple, because you can leave that DNS zone over there, but you can see it inside of DNSimple next to all your other zones. And not only can you see it, but let's say you wanted to add subdomain to it. You can actually do that from inside DNSimple, and it'll synchronize the two together.
What? Less time in the Azure portal? Are you crazy?
Yeah, I know. Madness, right?
How do I get this lovely new feature? Where do I go? How do I get it? How do I turn it on?
Just log in. Just log in and turn it on. It's under your account. If you log in, you can take a look, and there should be on any domain. You'll also see ways to turn on various connectors. So, we call these integrated providers. You can turn them on either on the domain level or on the app level. And once they're hooked up, essentially they do bidirectional sync.
Right. That's beautiful.
You just had a thumbs up bubble appear right over you. Is that your...
I know.
Is that an iPhone feature?
But it was weird because I was scratching my shoulder and I'm like, why is it...
You're scratching your shoulder with your thumb up and all of a sudden you see these thumbs up coming over your head. What is that?
I can't get that to work. When I try to get it to work, it never works. It only works if I do a gesture that I'm not intending to make that gesture.
Apple.
This technology is getting too complicated.
It's getting weird.
It is.
Yeah. It should be more simple.
Right? That's what I think.
All right. So tell us about pricing. What are we looking at for using this new tool?
Okay. So that's actually really cool news. If you're on our solo plan, you don't pay anything for it.
Wow. Whoa.
Okay. That's hard to argue.
And then, last year we changed our pricing. So we moved more to usage-based pricing, which is essentially you only pay for the zones that you use. You pay for the query volume that you use if you're on a solo or Teams plan. And then we decided that for the domain control plane, that for connections to domains elsewhere, for now, we're not going to charge anything. We're going to give it to everybody, whoever's at DNSimple, no charge for it. So you can start hooking up today with no additional charge. And if you use us for DNS, then the zones you use, you'll pay for those, but otherwise you don't.
I can't argue with that, man. Wow. Great.
It's very nice. Yeah, without a doubt.
Is there anything that we missed in terms of the control plane?
I think the only thing that I'd really love to know, and this is going to be something that our customers, and whether new or old, are going to tell us, is where do we go next with this? What providers are really ones that you'd love to see us integrate with? Tell us. Just reach out to support@dnsimple.com and say, hey, I use this provider. I would love it if you add one. Or in the app, when you select providers, and there's an option for you don't have my provider, and you can tell us which provider you want us to use.
So I mean, I see three essential services here. We only talked about two of them really: the registration, the DNS. The third one is SSL, TLS certs. Which still is, I mean, Let's Encrypt has made it better for no other reason.
So much better.
Actually, Azure
the
Managed
90-day cert is genius, right?
Actually, Azure Managed certs are free.
Yeah. Well, so is the Let's Encrypt certs, but it's just like...
Yeah, but Let's Encrypt is kind of, has a little Rube Goldberg mechanism. Yeah, I did that, and then it stopped.
No, that's the beauty of it. Again, so for example, our redirection service terminates HTTPS connections using Let's Encrypt certificates and does automatic rotation of those certificates, hooks into your DNS so that it just handles everything. Yeah. And that really, Let's Encrypt has changed the game around certificates. I know why some people still hold on to this idea that they want to have a certificate for a year or 2 years, which, by the way, now you can't do more than 2 years.
Yeah. We used to be able to get 20s.
Yeah, but not anymore. Now they keep getting, and eventually I think it's going to keep getting shorter and shorter because automation is amazing.
Yeah.
It makes it so that if you can do something in automated fashion, scheduled or unscheduled, it means you have the ability to fix stuff really fast.
Yep.
Because if something goes wrong outside of your control, you can essentially put things back the right way.
I love having things in Azure because I'm already authenticated, That's why I love these managed certificates, because I don't have to go through a third-party provider and prove to them I am who I say I am. I'm already authenticated through Azure. They know me.
Yep.
Like, yes, that's me. I logged in.
Yeah.
And now give me a certificate.
Automated certificates being in front of services was really something we should have done a long, long time ago. I'm super happy to see that it's been adopted so widely now. And And if you're using a provider that it provides any kind of hosting and they don't automate that, it makes me wonder why. Like, get on their backs and say, automate this.
Yeah.
So, and I can see obviously your path forward is being able to pull from more registration sources.
Yes.
Being able to connect to more DNS services.
Yes.
We can argue whether you need more certs or not, because once you get to Let's Encrypt, you're kind of done. So, and I don't know if there's another service area you got to go. So there's obviously the increasing in each of those three areas, but is there another area to add?
I'd say just, training and education is in your blogs are great for that, your blog posts.
Yeah.
But just keeping your customer, because when your customers know what they're doing, they're going to be a lot happier.
Mm-hmm.
But, DNS, if you're just coming into the IT world, it can be overwhelming.
I'm digging into stuff like static stores.
So, yeah.
Because I have this problem now, right? Did I stick it in blob storage in Azure, or is it sitting in an S3 bin somewhere?
Yeah, we've talked about, so one of the things we've talked about off and on over the years is, do we want to move beyond the domain protocols, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, with certificates, we did that already to some small extent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they were directly related to domain protocols,
Yeah,
but still.
But for example, caching, basically caching of HTTP is a very common next step.
Yeah.
Our biggest concern is that it changes the dynamics of the type of traffic we're handling. And all of a sudden, we're handling actual content.
Yeah.
And that steps over a line where you start dealing with copyright infringement, takedown notices.
Yeah.
Real-time effects. Yeah. All of that sort of thing.
Yeah. And so that's one of those things that we've always said, you know what? Our business is about domains. We really want that to be our core business. And so we're going to make the best business of that and keep making that better. And we've stuck to our guns for it'll be 15 years now.
Wow.
Next year.
Now, does that mean you're going to go all in on RDAP?
So RDAP is a requirement. Anybody who's a registrar is going to have to run RDAP, because RDAP essentially makes it so instead of having this public, text file that people are looking at, they actually you're allowed to have limits to who can see what. So for example, law enforcement is going to be able to see one level. The general population is going to be able to see another level. Other registrars and registries will be able to see different levels. And so information privacy, which is becoming a really big thing in most places in the world, that actually is going to be built into the protocol. Whereas in Whois, it was just like, here's a text file.
Yeah.
And what goes in it is completely random. Woo!
Yeah. Scrape-O-Rama.
So only law enforcement can see backdoor.netrocks.com or honeypot.netrocks.com.
I mean, if enough people came to us and said, we really want this thing. So domain registration didn't exist in the first version of DNSimple.
Right.
When I launched in 2010, it was just DNS.
Yep.
And the only reason domain registration was added in DNSimple was because a bunch of people who I knew came to me and said, domain registration is terrible. Can you please just do something about it?
Yeah.
You made DNS not suck. Could you make registration not suck too,
Yes.
please?
And I said, okay. And that has continued the hell of domain registration that will not leave my life.
No, we've
and
ruined
I don't
you.
think ever will.
I think you at first were using Slow Patty, weren't you? At first?
I personally was. We originally built on another provider, and we've since changed things behind the scenes several times because the world keeps changing.
Yeah.
Like I said,
that's the other thing about these certs, right? Is we're constantly having the root domain hacks and things. Like you don't want a long duration cert when it's like, that's not a valid cert anymore. It's dangerous.
And that's another reason also why we rotate DNSSEC keys automatically, which very few people do. And we do it because we basically took that same concept that Let's Encrypt made popular and said, we're going to do the same thing for DNSSEC.
Right.
Done. And as long as we can hook into a registrar that'll allow us to rotate those keys automatically, they will be rotated automatically. There's not a choice.
Yeah, and which really means is their infrastructure up to automatically replacing those routinely? Because that's our best chance to resist these attacks, is that the keys are constantly changing.
Yeah, and because if you're halfway, let's say you're 30 days into a 90-day window, and you do have some sort of a breach, run the rotation. Do it right now.
Yeah.
Problem solved. Key, compromised key, gone. Yeah. Granted, problem solved might be you have other issues, like how do you let your keys get compromised? But at least you're taking one step towards a little bit more security than you would if you're sitting there and, Bob down in accounting, I think, has the certificate, username and password on his notepad on his desk. Can you go grab that?
Bob in accounting gets a bad rap on this show.
Sorry, Bob.
Always Bob in accounting.
Guy,
it's not his fault. Somebody just delegated it to him.
There he is. He's
Bob
the one who's got
needs
it.
to say no more often, really.
He does.
Yes, he does. When Alice comes and says, Bob, can you do this? Bob needs to go, not a chance.
No. Where the hell is my red stapler, by the way? All right. So before we go, one other question. What is your experience with C#, if any?
So when we wrote the original API clients, I went through it. I looked at it a little bit and played around with it, but that's about the extent of it. Wow. I grew up in the world of Macs when I was a kid. Yeah. My dad had Macs around and VAX VMS systems. So it was really old school or new school. And I never really did the Windows thing. I spent a few years writing Java on Windows machines. Mm-hmm. But I've been mostly either a Mac or Linux guy for my entire life, so I hadn't had much of a need for C#.
But C# runs on Mac and Linux now. It's completely cross-platform. Okay.
I do know
You're probably a Lisp guy, right?
I did have some time with Clojure. As shown in my bio, I did like Lisp, but Erlang is still my favorite language. There's something about Erlang that every time I use it, it makes me go, wow, this is so much fun. This is such a great language because it's so different than anything else out there.
Yeah. It's that functional thinking mindset. You know, I meet Haskell people like that too. They're just delighted with what they've written.
I love the way how functions in Erlang are. They basically accept the shape of the data that they shape, and you can have different variations of them that accept different data that shape differently. Nice. And there's just something about it that is like, man, that's such an elegant way of handling some of these problems. Yeah. Now, granted, don't look at me anymore to write code because I've written a lot of bad code in my life anymore, and I no longer try to make it pretty. So I'm not the best person there, but it's still my favorite.
But you're also not like a vegan militant about it. You know what I mean? Whatever you want to do, it's fine. We just want to handle your domains.
Yeah, a couple years back, we did the advent of code, and I wrote everything in C++.
Wow!
So why the heck not?
Cool.
Just it's for fun. There's nothing to me, and this is one of the things that I have to say, that as we move more and more towards a world where code assist tools based on AI are going to be part of a normal developer's daily routine, I'm saddened a little bit by it because I love writing code. And honestly, there's going to get to a point here where we will not write much code anymore. We'll still be thinking in systems.
Unless we want to. For me, it's better than doing puzzles. I mean,
me too. I love it. I love it. And I hope right now I spend almost all my time just running DNSimple and thinking about the business and things like that. I hope someday I'll be able to retire from running the business and focus again writing code because it's just such an enjoyable.
Well, you're doing something right because for these 15 or whatever years that we've been using your services, it's been a dream. Yeah. So
it's a really good team who
highly recommended,
who really focuses on this stuff. And I appreciate that. Thank you again, Carl, for being a customer, and Richard for being a customer for so long.
Kudos to your team, man. They do a great job.
They do.
And you'll have to come back in another 10 years and tell us what you'll be up to.
It's a deal. If we're still around in 10 years and still kicking, and y'all are still kicking, we will do this
sooner. I'm sure.
I hope so.
Well, I hope so. You can call me at any time. I'm always happy to talk.
All right, cool. Anthony Eden, thank you very much for spending this time with us. And wow, great stuff.
It's my pleasure. Thank you both.
All right, and we'll see you next time on .NET Rocks. .NET Rocks is brought to you by Franklin's Net and produced by Plop Studios, a full-service audio, video, and post-production facility located physically in New London, Connecticut, and of course in the cloud. Online at pwop.com. Visit our website at dotnetrocks.com for RSS feeds, downloads, mobile apps, comments, and access to the full archives going back to show number 1. Recorded in September 2002. And make sure you check out our sponsors. They keep us in business. Now go write some code. See you next time. Got a transmitter band by the FCC. Yes, I'm a